Well, hello there and good day. Thank you so much for joining me at Ariel's Writing Corner, the place where we talk about all things writing related. I'm your host, Jesse Pohlman, and today we're asking a question. What are some strategies for starting a scene? I got this on Blue Sky, and I'm taking the question and I'm expanding it a lot, and I'm also just giving my input. So if you have your own strategies for starting a scene, this could be any scene. Leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you think. I do appreciate whatever feedback I get. It does help me come up with better answers. And who knows, maybe there'll be a sequel video to this. So, again, first of all, these are just my thoughts on starting a scene. And I'm going to start with the obvious. There's no universal to this. There's a lot of different ways you can start a scene. There's a lot of different techniques. I'm just going to talk about some, and then we're going to move on. So there is no one trick to it, as there are many different types of scenes. For starters, go into drafting knowing what your scene is trying to achieve. It's my big thought, right? Is there's no one way to do things. There is no one true way. Mercedes Lackey, Valdemar, I wish I was wearing one of their shirts. I'm wearing a Goofy shirt instead. But there's no trick to it, right? So there's no universal way to do it. And you have to think about what your scene's goal is going to be. In other words, is this a scene where, like, we get some character development, or is this a scene where there's a big battle scene? You know, is this the love interests falling head over heels for each other, or is this a lover's quarrel where they fight with each other? Whose perspective do we have? Whose perspective have we had up until now? All of these things are pretty important to go through. So, to sum it up very simply, and this may seem a little oversimplistic, but just roll with me for a second here. Sometimes you start with a character doing a thing. This is popular for prologues and opening chapters alike because the conventional wisdom is you hook somebody in with action. You know, describing a building is nice and all, and if you've got the chops to do a really good description, you can do it. But a lot of times it's easier to get looped in with somebody's action scenes, somebody doing a thing. So you start with the character doing a thing, but other times you start with a description, right? Other times you are just chilling out and you're talking about the way a room looks, because the character, we're going to get into this in a second, is looking at the room. So the character is actively doing a thing, but it's not an action-y thing. It's just kind of like a chill thing. They're looking around the room. Maybe they're wondering what time they get off work. Maybe they've got a pen they're twirling around, kind of like, I'm going to drop my clipboard, this pen that I keep handy at my desk, along with this clipboard that I have notes on. I bonked myself in the head with it. Isn't that funny? Don't you come here for laughs? Speaking of laughs, things you can do include invoking senses, which are like the character looking around the room. What they see is what they receive. If the character is walking by a garbage dump, they're going to smell bad smelling things. That's something that goes in your narration. My final thought, though, is think cyclically. Sometimes you want to begin where you're going to end. And let's talk about that for a second. See, I've had about a week to think about how I was going to frame this video, and my answer to that is just wing it, because that's what my answer often is. But you notice how I always sketch out notes for a video, how I always have the little, I almost want to call it a PowerPoint, a couple slides worth of PowerPoint. That is because I am starting somewhere and I plan to wind up somewhere. Just like there's no one true way, right? There's a lot of tactics you can use, and I hope I've given you some things to think of. I especially like the invocation of senses, because we have senses as human beings, and if there are aliens out there, there are probably aliens that have senses too. Otherwise, how are they listening to this video? You start where you want to end. If you know your character's path is to discover something about themselves, you can start the scene with them not knowing everything about what's going on in the scene. Maybe they're, I don't know, they're getting the great reveal from the villain, so they've been tied up and they just had the mask taken off of them, and now they're in the villain's chambers, and the villain's saying, hey, here's my grand plan. You didn't know what was going on at the start, because all you had was your limited information, your limited sensory input, your thoughts, your feelings, the taste of a gag in your mouth, the constriction of the ropes on your wrists, whatever it is. We're not going to get too fun with it. This is a different kind of scene. But we are going to talk about how those things feed into your output, which feeds back into your input. If the character doesn't know something at the start of your scene, and they learn something by the end of it, you know where to start your scene. Did that help you? I don't know. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. That's for you to decide. Again, leave a comment. Let me know your favorite tactics for starting a scene. Thank you all so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, do subscribe to the channel. We're trying to grow and just have some outreach. I do these for fun, so if you have a question, leave it in the comments or leave it on Blue Sky or whatever, and I will get back to you. I am on Blue Sky as J. Pohlman Writing. I have a website. It is jpohlmanwriting.com. And yeah, I do all sorts of fun little writing-related stuff. Thank you all so much for joining me, and as always on this channel, pieces.